He was a candidate for the 5th Congressional District open seat, the newly created district after remapping that eventually was won by Andy Ogles, but he ran a spirited campaign. And in the aftermath of that, we heard that Stewart Parks had run into a little spot of bother regarding January 6th. And since then, we have obviously followed his story with great interest. If you don't know the backstory, it's an incredible one, and we're going to share it with you now as we welcome Stewart Parks in studio with us to talk about his story and his experience over the past year or so. Stewart, welcome into studio, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome back to freedom. For those who don't know, you have spent the last how long in a federal facility?
So I was in federal prison for 5 months and 10 days, and then had 20 days of halfway house. So literally about a week ago, on August 5th, I was released from federal custody.
Why were you in custody?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Why were you in custody?
I was found basically just a crazy bench trial in Washington, D.C. The judge found me guilty of 5 federal misdemeanors relating to January 6th, just simple trespassing, and also was being silly with the metal detector one. And even though Capitol Hill police testified at my trial that nothing was stolen from the Capitol, the judge still found me guilty, which is just mind-blowing. So I had to go to prison over it.
So you were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, as so many other patriotic Americans were, expressing frustration with the results of the election in support of Donald Trump.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what happened that day.
So it was the largest crowd in D.C. history. I mean, people from all over were there, and there was a lot of excitement. Trump gave a great speech, and then we peacefully walked to the Capitol. And by then, it was just real nebulous. Because the intention why we're going to the Capitol to hear another legally, peaceful speech and regarding the events that happened in the November election. And so, the bike racks were moved. We were led to believe we could go closer to the building, which we did. It was at my trial that I went through several lines of police officers peacefully, and they never once told me to turn around. No, you can't, go close to the building. So that's how I got to the building. And then once I got there, I went in through the doors. Doors were open. And shortly afterwards, met another group of police officers, and they said they made statements such as "We're here, we're with you, we understand you," and so forth. Very, inviting statements. And then I was in the building for 20, 30 minutes, so forth. Didn't tear up anything, and just basically walked around, observed what was happening. And then I was silly, being frivolous with the metal detector wand, and I put it back and left the building. And then the FBI raided me several months later.
So you were one of the, I don't know how many people you might know, but you were one of the at least hundreds, if not thousands of people. We've all seen, and this is what I want to create. I want to create this distinction because we've all seen the videos of people busting out windows, and that happened in certain parts of the Capitol. And obviously, that's obvious that these people are doing bad things. But there were thousands of people that didn't witness any of that thought you had been allowed into the building. Did you think that you were being allowed into the building when you walked into the Capitol?
Yes, sir. There was never at any time that a Capitol Hill police officer, told us to stop, don't get close to the building. And then, they led us to believe we could go closer. And then once we were there, a lot of people like myself peacefully entered through the doors that were open. And many people have seen the videos of police officers opening doors for them. And, so you're exactly right. I mean, there were people that had different attitudes that day, but the majority of people, like the grandmas, people's children were arrested.
Right.
We were just all peacefully, patriotically gathered.
Before we talk about your experience and everything you went through with the trial and your subsequent sentence, now, Stewart, can you understand why, and understand where I'm coming from, why you might, because of this misunderstanding, might have had to have been punished in some way? Maybe a fine, or do you still feel like you didn't do anything wrong based on your understanding of what was going on that day?
That is correct. And I'm glad you asked that question because, there's so much misconception. I even ran into a lot of misconception even when I was in prison because the inmates, their information is so limited that they thought I was like just such just so hardcore. And I was trying to explain to them like, no, we were peacefully gathered. Like the cops let us in, but the inmates would not even listen to it. They were like, oh, that's just so hardcore. You going against the government. And I had to explain to them, no,
that's not a good idea. You should say, yeah, I'm hardcore, buddy. No. You don't mess with Stewart Parks. I am hard as rocks.
So that just is crazy. And I really hate to say this, but there was half the population in prison thought I stormed the White House. And I've even ran into people, while campaigning and just being out in the free world, that people are like, oh, you stormed the White House. And it just, and I've gotten to the point where now I don't even correct them. I just, peacefully change the subject.
So you went into the Capitol. When you left the Capitol and you realized that there was obviously some of the videos indicate that there were some bad things going on that day that you didn't see, because it's a huge place, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever think to yourself in the aftermath, man, I might be getting a telephone call here, or did it concern you?
That is, oh my God, that's such a great question, because it was just, I will say this. So I'm in a famous photograph with Jacob Chantley. They call him the QAnon shaman with the horns.
Right.
And it's wild that, I just stumbled and I'm in the back and I'm in the photograph, and there came an instance, time afterwards where my co-defendant and I were the only people that hadn't been raided yet. And, you look at that, there was, people, I wasn't the first group of people in Tennessee arrested, but, the writing was on the wall that, Stewart Parks' day's coming soon. And, what really, was eye-opening was I was actually in Rosemary Beach vacationing, and I got a phone call that my co-defendant, got bit by a snake. He was dying in the ICU, and the sheriff came and arrested him, essentially like on his deathbed, and, handcuffed him. And I got a phone call, and, it was only a matter of time till, they were going to come raid me. And so it was harsh.
Well, because I can understand a government, and this is where I'm coming at. I can understand a government that would look at you and say, Stewart, you didn't realize what was going on, but there was bad things going on, and we're going to have to slap you on the wrist here. We're going to have to give you a fine. We're going to have to, give you probation or something along the lines. And that's not what happened at all. They wanted to put you, it's my understanding originally, they wanted to put you in jail. You walked into the Capitol building, didn't destroy anything, didn't hurt anybody, didn't attack anybody, and walked out. They wanted to give you 7 years originally?
They were calling for my head. And what's crazy is there's a lot of other people that were fined and so forth. Me, I only had to pay $95, and that was like some sort of court cost. And I didn't even have to pay restitution, which is crazy, because like my fifth charge having to do with theft of government property. And basically the activist judge said that even though he basically said that I deprived the Capitol Hill Police, the owner of its
that
use,
wand.
Correct, and the asportation is what qualifies as theft. And so I didn't have to pay restitution, which is crazy, because most theft charges you pay restitution to the victim for, because it's taken away from them, they don't get it back. But yeah, so they put me in a prison that was formerly a medium, still had medium inmates, medium guards, medium, environment. And so I went from like medium low, halfway house, and then supervised release. I didn't even get a full graduation, like, most inmates do. So, it was really harsh. Yeah.
So you go through the trial, and what was your argument in trial? Talk to me about the trial experience and what your arguments were and what was ultimately decided and how you ultimately got sentenced.
Yes, sir. So I agreed with my counsel that it'd be a wise idea for me to testify, so which I did, and I told the truth what happened. And it's wild. Like the prosecutor, the U.S. attorney prosecutor said that no, because of what he's saying, he needs to be have an enhancement for obstruction of justice because he lied on the stand, and the judge agreed with them. And it's wild when I look at it. I was basically in a room full of Democrats and a guy with a hammer. That's essentially what it was. I was forced to go in there, and they made all the decision. And we did everything we could. Filed a motion of change of venue. I even waived my right to a jury trial. We did everything we could, and there was just no way of getting out. And I got the harsh sentence I did. It was just mind blowing. Like there were times where the prosecutors were kind of fumbling, and the judge would help them, like coach them into sticking something on me.
Did you feel like the fix was in, that there was no way that you were going to get a fair trial during the time?
Yes, sir, because it was really tough because, my co-defendant, he had pled out because they stuck him with like felony charges. So he was facing like 5 years, some crazy amount. So he pled out, got 3 months, got out. And, the fix was in, definitely. I mean, there was no way out. And me, I'm like, no, I didn't commit a crime. So that's why I went through with the trial and fought, as hard as I could, testified, said everything. And
so, I mean, I've long argued, and this seems like a perfect opportunity to ask a man who has gone through what you've gone through. And by the way, you should not have been in jail, regardless of whether you were guilty of anything or not. There's no way you should have been put in a federal incarceration facility. At the same time, I've argued that the people that went into the building maybe should have known that this wasn't the process by which you get into the U.S. Capitol. Do you look back on that and have regrets about not asking questions? I mean, maybe it's an easy question to ask now, knowing the political prosecution and persecution that you had to go through. But do you look back on it now and think, man, I probably should have stepped back and waited a minute? Or do you still feel like I didn't do anything wrong?
Well, this is a great question. Needs to be asked. I look back and it's wild. Like when I talk to other January 6th people, like you look, it wasn't like just Stewart Parks and his friend from high school that went in the Capitol. They're now arresting like almost 1,500 people. Like these were massive historic crowds that went in the building, and we're all like hanging out. We're laughing with the police officers, just like buddies. So to answer your question is I don't have any regret because the police let us in, their body language is there. And I even said this in the trial. And you got to think too, if you look at me, like I wasn't armed. The police were more armed than I was.
Well, sure.
And I went through several lines of police officers all the way to the building.
And not once did they say, hey, y'all aren't supposed to be here. Y'all need to go leave.
That's correct. That's correct. Okay. And so you got to ask yourself, like, how did I even get that close to the building to begin with? And then I go in, and then I'm in there not 5 seconds, 5 minutes. I'm in there for like almost 30 minutes. I mean, this is a question that the public need to ask. And then, I peacefully exited, went home, and, 7 months later, get raided by the counterterrorism unit.
What was that like?
Oh, it was wild. I mean, I woke up at, June 3rd of 2021 at 5:53 a.m. in the morning, and I'm, renovating a property in downtown Columbia, and I just hear banging on the door, and they're like, FBI, and they didn't even give me a chance to really like get out of bed because they just kicked down my door.
They kicked in your door?
Yes, sir. And they're in like, it looked like it was military gear, full body armor, pointing machine guns at me, and they're like screaming, stick your hand through the bedroom window, so where we can see. So, I stick my hand through the bedroom window to the living room where they're in, and they do the normal. I complied, peacefully.
Sure.
And they do the normal procedure, handcuff me, and all I'm in is like shorts and boxers, and I'm barefooted, and they just, take me to like.
They don't give you any opportunity to get dressed.
Oh, it wasn't until like I get in the unmarked, blacked out Jeep out front, and by this time, I look down the road and there's like long line of, the Columbia police is there. I mean, there's a lot. They made a scene. It wasn't like just
all there for you.
Yes, and my neighbors.
Stewart, no offense to you, but I think this is a little. I don't think this is a little overkill for you.
Oh my God, yeah, people. It was, June 3rd. It was during the week. I remember people like nurses were out in the front yard, like my neighbors. I mean, they just embarrassing me. It's a huge disgrace. And I remember as far as the eye could see, there were like law enforcement vehicles there. And while I'm in handcuffed, they gave me my hearing aids and my shirt and my shoes and. They took me to an unmarked building originally in Columbia and they didn't, ask if I wanted an attorney yet, but thank God I had, some legal knowledge to ask for an attorney. So they're starting to interrogate me, and I said, may I have an attorney present? And then that's when they closed the file, re-handcuffed me, took me to the Davidson County Jail. And we were there before the jail even opened, so we just sat in the parking lot. And then thank God I was released on my own bond a couple hours later.
And then eventually you had, obviously, the trial, which we kind of covered. Let's take a quick time out, and we'll be back with Stewart Parks relating his experience. He was and is a January 6th defendant, and frankly, he had a political persecution with regard to the amount of time he had to spend incarcerated in a federal facility. We'll talk about that experience in just a moment as we continue. It's the Matt Murphy Show. Right now, Stewart Parks is joining us. Stewart knows his way around politics. He ran for the 5th Congressional District candidacy in that what was ultimately an open seat after Cooper decided he wasn't running after redistricting. And we had him on for that, and he was an unfortunate He kind of got caught up in the January 6th nonsense that led to his incarceration in a federal facility recently. We got up to the point where the guilty verdict was almost a foregone conclusion, sadly. We were discussing the trial. Did it surprise you when you got sentenced?
Yes, sir. It in a way, no, because then I was already found guilty. And
did your attorney kind of make you aware? I mean, were you aware of kind of what was going on?
Well, yes, sir. And, we were still trying to get, just ask the judge for, hey, home confinement, just something lighter. But the prosecutors were like, oh no, he told the truth on the stand. That's a upcharge, raise his points, to make sure, he going to prison. And I didn't go to a camp like, with tennis courts, kind of like what you see on the TV. This was like prison behind a fence. And, I was just so blown away. I'd never been in trouble in my life. And it was just horrifying. So,
I mean, naturally, I don't want to necessarily ask you to recount these bad moments, but I can only imagine I don't know you well, Stewart, but you don't seem like a prison kind of guy. And so here you go, and you've been told that you're expected to. Your prison sentence was to be served in Memphis, correct?
Yes, sir. FCI Memphis, which was formerly a medium. Now, people like me, before I went to prison, was unaware. I was just shocked. I was blown away because I think I'm the first in my family to go to federal prison. So I didn't. All I had was my co-defendant to tell me what it was like. But he went to a better prison.
By the way, great. You got something to one up everybody else in the family at Thanksgiving, right? Like, no. I get to eat first. I've been to federal prison. Who's been?
Well, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but he said something last segment about your co-defendant was bitten by a snake.
Yes, sir.
So I'm assuming he survived, correct?
He did. And this was a rattlesnake. He was in the ICU at death's door, and the sheriffs just come in, put handcuffs on him. Every time he had to go to the bathroom, they had to escort him to the bathroom. So, he was at death's door, and they still arrested him on his ICU bed.
Was he convicted?
Yes, sir. So, he had to plead out because that's why. And we were co-defendants. We were together. They tried us at the beginning, but we had to file a severance because they were going to slap him with false felony charges. And so that's why he, his trial and everything was done way before mine. So he went to a medical too, which in the prison world, again, for everyone that's not aware of this, medicals are typically better because the people that go there, have cancer and so forth. So they're more subdued, more focused on their treatment.
Sure.
Not prison, prison politics and prison life. Whereas I went to a former medium, now a low in Memphis, which is a pretty violent city. And it was just mind blowing. There was like murderers, child molesters, any type of crime you can think of. They were there.
How do you manage that? What's the game plan? What's the game plan there, Stewart?
Well, here's what the plan was. And I talked about this on Tennessee Star yesterday, which did a great interview. So the plan was going in that I was just going to lay low, just keep my head down, be peaceful, not say anything to anybody. And the guards take me in. And they released me to, let's just say inner prison organization. And they're like, oh, he's a January 6th. And I remember seeing the inmate's face light up. And he's like, oh, right on. So come this way. And they escort me to the inmate. So by this point, the guards aren't even in the picture. Now it's just me behind locked doors in the prison yard. And the inmate, he's got a grin on his face. And he's like, let me take you to your cellie. And I go in there and I really did have a good cellmate for the first half of my sentence or my time in prison, and he was from Tennessee. The prison world is so different from the free world. It's just shocking. But he was. Tell
me how that is. Give me your. We've all seen the television shows.
And that, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, I've seen this on Shawshank Redemption. All this stuff. And and I really, I say this in the humblest of terms, like we talked about, the information is so limited. They only had like Fox News and CNN. So they said that they were cheering on the January 6th crowd when that happened. So all these inmates are like, got their hands ringing together like, oh boy, I can't wait to see you when they come here. So, they had good paperwork. And in the prison world, it's your paperwork is what you live by. And so there were people in there that, did inappropriate things with children. They were former police officers. They were snitches. And those people, like, oh my God, like, I cannot believe just what happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a kind of honor among thieves almost.
Yeah, that's the term that the prison yard uses, and I mean, I was just blown away. I was like, I thought this was like sensation.
So there was in a weird way within. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in a weird way, there was respect for you that you didn't see coming when you got there.
You're right. I mean, yeah, and I don't know how. Like, you did good saying respect. I think there was more of like a welcome. I use the word welcoming, like, and that's just how it is. Like your own demographics, and I hate talking like this. It's prison, so your own people.
But there's a separation, right? There's gangs. People run in tribes or in gangs.
I'm in prison, so
right. So you gotta.
I hate talking like this, but I'm answering your question. I'm in prison, and your people have to take care of you, because when I first came in, you have nothing, and poverty's like very widespread in prison, and the last thing they want to see is you go in debt, and that's another thing. Debt will get you killed. And so other people giving me gifts, and I'm like, no, I'm pushing. When I first get in there, I'm pushing them away, like, no, thank you. I don't need this, and they're like, no, they're like forcing soap and different things like food to get me started till I can go to commissary to buy product, because they are like, no, we don't want you going in debt to someone else, and they come take,
Right. You don't want to go in debt. I mean, that's the way the system works, right? You don't want to go in debt to the wrong person, because they might call in that debt in a way that you don't anticipate.
Yeah, and I mean, there was stories from other yards where people have been killed over a 48-cent stamp. And this yard that I came from, I mean, they had drones flying in drugs, people in the woods throwing backpacks in the prison yard, guards bringing in stuff. I mean, it was just mind blowing. Like, I can't even put into words. If only people knew how bad things really were. And, like I said, the inmates were very nice to me. Really thankful, that I had a good cellmate, because,
What was day to day like? I mean, did you spend most of your day in your cell? Did you have a lot of time outside of the cell in the yard? You mentioned that. Just describe to me the average day.
Well, this is something that people need to realize. So this isn't the Davidson County jail where you have, the bars in the front, where you can see through, around. I was in like a cell block where I only had like a tiny thin piece of glass to look outside and then look through my door. So, I'm completely bricked in, and, I didn't have, like a call button in case my cellmate just all of a sudden wants to kill me. I didn't have that capability. So, and we went on lockdowns all the time. I remember one time we went on lockdown for like several weeks in a row, where it's just myself, my cellmate in a bricked in cell. It's about the size of a normal bathroom. And, thank God we got along great. And I was like so sad when he got shipped to another prison. A lot of people say he was too hard for the yard.
I mean, because you don't know what you're going to get. And, you've seen the stories about, and you don't want to, and there's a negative, a real negative side to prison. And if you get a good bunkmate, you're like, okay,
that's a huge.
I don't have to worry about any of that. And then now there's a new guy coming in, and you don't know what you're dealing with, and you're going to have to fight or whatever.
Yeah. And people don't realize, like, and I got along with all kinds of organizations in prison. There's people in there that may have killed 20 people, but the police caught them with a pistol and a little bit of weed, and now they're in there with me. And there's others there. There's people that outsmarted the BOP and may have done something atrocious, and they worked their way down to the low, medium, whatever you want to call it, where I was at. So I mean, you're right when you say you don't really know who you're locked up with. And, like I said, I'm just thankful that, I only had 2 cellmates the whole time, and, it's just wild.
Did you tell, and Michael's a friend, and I know that he's done a great job with the Tennessee Star covering your story, and I've been following along, as he related your story. And I think you told him that you got bitten?
Yes, sir. So I got bit 3 times while I was in prison. Now,
by an inmate?
Yes, sir. And this wasn't like, you're a Republican, I'm gonna bite you. It wasn't like out of respite. It was like a compulsive, like almost, like kind of like a kid, like play bite. And like I said, I got along with other people, a lot of people, and I'm so close to getting out. Now, the thought when that happened, I was like, do I fight and, teach this guy a lesson and lose my good time? Because it's a miracle. I'm supposed to be in prison right now because I was sentenced 8 months from February 6th, which has me getting out October 4th. But I was so perfect in prison, I used the laws of Congress to, like First Step Act and good time, which means you get a 15% discount on your sentence. I was able to get out, July 16th out of prison into the Nashville halfway house. But, so it was wild. Like I got bit. And on the third time, I'm laying in bed and he bites me on the elbow.
Was this your cellmate
no,
at the
sir.
time, or
No,
was
sir.
just some other guy?
No, sir. This was another inmate that had been, he was in a 4-person cell and they just kicked him out, and I didn't ask questions.
Probably because he was biting people.
I didn't ask questions because, it's just one of those things you just don't ask. But yeah, he was moved to a closer proximity to my cell, and then he decided to just come in one day and he bit me. But then I guess he felt bad hours later and gave me an Otis Spunkenmeyer chocolate chip muffin, which is, it's just wild. And I'm like, well, you don't have to, you just don't have to bite me, and this is fine.
Wait a minute. So
it's a different world.
This is perhaps the best story I've ever heard of the radio. So the guy bites you, can't help himself, it doesn't seem. And then later on, he feels bad because he's bitten you, so he brings you an Otis Spunkenmeyer muffin.
Chocolate chip muffin, yes, sir. And
did you eat the muffin?
I did because
it's an Otis Spunkenmeyer. It's pretty good.
Correct, and that's what I'm saying. Like the poverty's so rampant in prison, it's like heaven.
Everything costs you money.
So what they do is the government the government gives you 3 meals. But they're like kind of like what you talked about in the last segment, how like the baker, if everyone coming to him,
sure.
It's going to be low quality. I mean, it was like the worst. Someone said it was federal surplus food. I mean, it had like the cookies was like moon rock.
So the food is not spoiled, but it's bad.
It's horrible. It's horrible. So then you have commissary, which to answer your question, kind of like what my life was like, I thank God, like my parent took over my companies and they would just wire me the profit. And there was like people so precious sending me money. I was like, no, you don't have to do it. Like I can be self-sustainable. And so I would buy from the commissary, which is crazy because they know you can't buy anywhere else except from them. So they just jack the prices up. And
so if you want better food, you're going to pay for it.
Yes, absolutely. They do a 30% markup because they claim that whatever you purchase goes towards your TV and your computer, which they take the TV away constantly because, they can't enforce. I mean,
so are there televisions in your cell, or is that like in a group setting?
You're talking about like the TVs?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So the TV room at this particular, all prisons are different, but this particular location, you go out of your cell and it's like a giant room and different TVs, and you have to sit where your people tell you to sit.
Okay. So, I mean, you seem like a fairly decent sport about these types of things. So, I've got to ask you. I mean, was anybody making like toilet liquor? I mean, did they do those sorts of things in prison? I mean, you hear the stories about they're making toilet wine, or the contraband and the drugs and whatnot.
Oh my God! I mean, I remember someone I say this in the humblest of terms. I hate how it was set up at commissary because I would put my order in and everybody would see my order, so I would be like sacks full of stuff, and you
got a mark on your back.
Yeah. So people are like, oh, Stewart's got money, and in prison it's either stamps or you barter,
right?
And so there were, I remember again, please don't laugh, but I'm in a third world prison, so any type of pleasure is like amazing. So they had Smuckers, like, strawberry jelly. So I would buy a bunch of them. Well, halfway through my prison sentence, they said, no, you can only buy one because there was an inmate making wine out of it. And
out of the jelly.
And so, there was stuff just being taken away from us all the time because the inmates would just outsmart the federal government. And, I remember one guy was saying like, hey, Stewart, you want a Big Mac or anything from McDonald's? It'll be $500, but I can make it happen for you.
What?
Yeah. It was like
I bet after 5 months it would almost have been worth it.
Well, I'm trying to get out because I didn't want the guards to see like, a French fry myself. That's all it took.
Were the guards fair? Were the guards?
So to answer your question, I was I was in there with people that were in prison with James Earl Ray. And so these guys were like experienced. They told me what to do, how to work the system.
They'd been
legally.
there a long time.
Yeah. So the best advice they gave me was just don't let the guards know who you are, which was tough because I guess due to the aspect of January 6th, like all the guards knew who I was. So it was kind of a weird. So I tried to stay out of the guards, but there were instances where I was sitting with the other January 6th guys in the cafeteria and the guards were like screaming at me like, hurry up and eat. And I'm one of these Southerners. Like, I like to get to know people, like, where you from, and, all this other stuff, like a good Southern meal, but the guards were, like, not having it. And it was the same way to other people. Like, they made you, like, force down your food to eat, and then they were like, get out, because the next...
I mean, was there an instance, and I understand this is a sensitive question, I mean, was there an instance where you thought, hey, I'm going to have to fight, I'm going to have to stand up for myself physically, or did it ever come to that?
That's a great question. Like I said, I live peacefully with all people from all walks of life.
Well, I mean, but every once in a while,
yeah, and I mean, with the biting, I woke up to a man's teeth in my arm, so and I'm disoriented.
You're gonna smack him, right? Did you smack him?
No. Well, listen, I'm so close to getting out.
You don't want to smack somebody, and
I'm close to getting out, because I mean, I had to get out. It was awful, and there was just instance where, and there was all right. So there was a time where someone took a bag of rice out of my cell, and me, I'm like, it's just $2 or $1.50. I'm like, it's fine, but it tore up the yard so much that something had to be done. And I learned, like, I was shocked. So, like, in the prison world, if you have bad paperwork or if you steal, like the honor among thieves, they're like, no, you're off the yard. You go check in now. So, I mean, I saw, like, a public beating for the first time, and I was just
the guy that stole the rice from you?
Yes, sir. And I was like, fellas,
other
it's
guys,
okay.
like, they didn't care. I mean, like, it wasn't you.
It wasn't
asking
me
for that, but they're like, he stole it. We don't care who he stole from, or we don't care your he stole, and he's got to take a punishment.
And it's wild because the prison didn't want to take him in because he's all like, bloody, barely can stand up. And
wow,
he in the federal government, we were like, they were like, you got to go check in, and the federal government's like, in order to check in, you got to say who you're running from. And he just said, oh, I fell in the shower. And the federal government's looking at him like, no.
Yeah, because he's not going to snitch.
Yeah, you can't snitch. No, that'll get you killed. So,
right. Is that the first thing you learned? It sounds like that's the first thing you learned. Don't snitch, you get killed. I mean, you have to learn. I mean, Stewart, one of the reasons that this interview was so fascinating to me is I had an opportunity to meet you before. You are one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life. And the idea of you being put in that circumstance, I can say it now because you're out and it's past you. It's like it's a comedy movie of sorts. I mean,
people couldn't believe, like, even when I was like on the prison phone, like my friends were like dying laughing.
I mean, I'm glad you can laugh. I mean, it's just your personality that you have the ability to laugh about this now. But when you think back on it, does any part of this make you a little bit angry that you had to spend time in jail? I mean, do you think about it in those terms?
Well, I'm gonna say this, like, it's a huge shock, and a lot of people ask me like where I am psychologically. I promise I'm like, I don't have any mental illness. Like, it's just wild going from the free world to prison. And I'm going to just be transparent. Like, I was good most of the time. I only cried one time, and I hate saying this, but like, I called my mom, and mothers have that instinct where they can know something's wrong.
Yeah.
And my mom's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? Is somebody hurting you?" And she just like made the tears come out, and it wasn't even like nobody was after me.
You told her the rice story, didn't you?
Yeah.
You told her the rice story, and
I just told her I was shocked. I was shocked. I was just shocked, being in prison, and then the inmates saw me, and I was like trying to, that's the last thing I want to do.
You don't want to cry
in prison, and the inmates like,
you're a mark if you cry, right?
Well, it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's not like child molester status, but it's, it's.
You don't want that on, you don't want that on you. Well, listen, Bell's telling me we're out of time. Stewart, God bless you for what you've been through. Is there anything we can do to help you? What's the next step for you?
Well, the next step is getting all this, reversed.
Kind of expunged from your record?
Yes, sir, because I'm involved in real estate. I love it, and there's a financial aspect to it where, underwriters and future financial people got to ask, when they do background checks. They're always asking me like, what's this, 5 charges, and I have to explain to them. So I'm forever going to have to explain to them what that is. And I don't want to do that.
Are you hopeful Trump presidency, possibility of a pardon? I would think.
Yes, sir. So that's a very real, that my legal counsel and I have talked about approaching Trump, very early in his, when he gets elected in 2024, for a pardon. Because
I like the way you say that, by the way. When he gets elected. That's good. I like that.
Yes, sir. because I need this because there's criminal.
Look, America needs this.
Yes,
and
sir.
no offense to you, Stewart, but a long list of why America needs Trump to be president. You're on it, but it's not near you're not near the
Yes,
top,
sir.
right? You know what I'm saying? But I get what you're saying.
Yes, sir. No, but and I need it because in the prison world, like there's career criminals that talk about career criminal up charges. So if the a George Soros prosecutor comes after me again for this interview, they can now say, oh, he has a history of this. We're going to give more time. So I have to get this taken off my record.
Anything we can do for you, let us know. We'll have you back. An incredible story. And I appreciate more than anything, Stewart, your positive approach to all of this. And you obviously have a wonderful family. You have a wonderful center. And we appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you, sir.